Hello, my friends. Welcome. I hope that your day is going well. Wherever your day is, I hope that you are having a good day. Listen, I know it's been a hard year. I know that a lot of people are struggling in 2025 because it's just frankly been a difficult year. There's been a lot of things going on. And that's okay. Like, it's okay to have a bad day, a bad week, a bad month. It's okay to have a bad year. You just have to keep going. You have to keep going.
You're listening to the Joe Martino Show, a podcast dealing with all things emotional, relational, and human nature. Joe is a licensed counselor in the state of Michigan, specializing in relationship therapy. He is also the author of the book, The Emotionally Secure Couple. All advice offered in this episode is offered for entertainment and educational purposes only. Enjoy the show.
I want to take a few minutes today and I want to talk about parenting, something that parenting is not, and then I want to talk about 6 things that I think good parenting is, or good parenting strives to do, and how we might do that together. Okay, so one of the things that I run into a lot is I have a lot of parents say to me things like, hey, my kid starts saying this and I don't know where they picked it up. We don't talk like that, or we don't say that. And to which I would say, well, okay, hold on though a second. You're not the only voice in your child's head. You're not the only voice that your children are going to hear. You're not the only voice that your child will hear throughout a day. You're not the only voice of influence in your children. You are the biggest influence. You are the biggest voice, but you are not the only voice. And you have to remember that. So when you send them to school, there's a whole bunch of voices there. When you send them to other places, to their friends' houses, to the church, all of those places, there are other voices there, and not all of those people are going to talk the same way that you talk. Not all of those people are going to respond to your children or to you the same way they do to anyone else. And so when they are maybe doing things or saying things that you don't say, you don't appreciate, it's okay to be like, hey, we don't talk about that. We don't talk like that, or however that sentence would go. But I want you to just take a few deep breaths on that. First of all, your kids are going to be their own people. They're going to have opinions and thoughts, and they're going to say things that are going to be different than you. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't get to correct them. That doesn't mean that you don't get to talk to them in whatever way you find appropriate. But it does mean that I just want you to take a deep breath and just relax on that for a minute. Because by and large, you will be the largest influence on your children over time. Bring consistency to them. Bring consistent identity to them. Bring consistent who they are, who you want them to be to them. And this does, I know this flies a little bit in what we talk about today. You know, I did a TikTok video, which, by the way, if you haven't found me there and they don't get banned, I am Joe Martino is my TikTok. And I talked about how I don't think that Robin Williams' character in Dead Poets Society is actually a hero. I actually think that he's something of a bad guy because he awakened things in Neil that he wasn't mature enough to handle. And Neil's parents weren't really all that unrealistic in their expectations of him. And of course, someone said they didn't love the son they had. They loved the son they wanted. I'm not even sure what that means. I'll be really honest. I'm not sure what that means. But I'm telling you, for a long time, science has said, right, and we can't question the science. That's a little bit of sarcasm. Science has said the number one voice in a child's influence is their parents over time. But it is important to remember that it's not the only voice. It's not the only voice of influence. It's not the only one, but it is the most important one. It is the biggest one. So the question becomes then, what do we do? How do we use that voice to shape our children's future? And I'm going to suggest to you that we want to do 6 things. We want to work towards 6 things, to getting our kids to be thinking about 6 things in their everyday life, and that these broad stroke principles will help them be better adults. And therefore, by the way, if you don't have children and you haven't turned me off yet, this episode is also for you, because these 6 things help run your life too. If you use them, they can help run my life if I use them. In other words, if you and I are going to be emotionally healthy, if you and I are going to have mental wellness, we want to have these 6 things running in our lives too. And the very first thing is we want to advocate for ourselves. In other words, we want to teach our children to advocate for themselves. And if you don't have kids, you need to ask yourself, how well do I do advocating for myself? Healthy kids advocate for themselves. And healthy kids learn to do that, and it starts with their parents, because their parents teach them to advocate for themselves with the parent. The parent teaches them to argue with themselves. I had a parent say to me a couple weeks ago, well, it's my daughter's job to obey. No, it's not. You're not in the military. You're not in some, structured thing. Your daughter's job, your son's job is to grow and to learn to advocate for themselves. And part of that is learning to question their parents. You want to teach them how to advocate for themselves well, because let's be honest, we went from not teaching people how to advocate for themselves to where now we're kind of like, well, if you're mad or if you're advocating for yourself, you can be mad and yell and scream at people, and that's advocating for yourself. And that isn't advocating for yourself either. That's just kind of being a jerk. We want to do this kindly. We want to do this well, but we want to be able to advocate for ourselves. We want to be able to question authority. We want to be able to express our needs. We want to be able to talk about what we want. We want to be able to talk about how we feel in a way that is helpful to all that hear it. All right, number 2, roll with change. If you listen to my episode on the 4 life rules, I talked about how, look, life changes, we have to adjust. Healthy kids, and therefore healthy adults, they know how to roll with change. They can advocate for themselves, and then as those needs change, they can roll with that. As the reality around them changes, they can roll with that. They can move with it. They can flow, because life is constantly changing. And we waste a lot of time in life trying to fight against change, because I get it. We all hate change. We all hate parts of change. We're going through some changes right now with our company, with our structure, and I'm not a big fan, but I have to be able to roll with it. I have to be able to move forward with it. When you roll with change and you can advocate for yourself, now we're moving forward towards the third step, which is understanding and utilizing boundaries. Can you understand what boundaries are? I talk to people all the time, and we get boundaries mixed up. We tend to think that boundaries are for us to tell other people how to live their lives. And that's not true. Boundaries are for us. Boundaries are so that we can say to other people, listen, you can live your life however you want. You can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you find to be useful for you, but I'm going to only interact in this way. I'm only going to engage in this way. And that is healthy, because those are boundaries. So the first 3 things that we want to use our voice to help our kids shape is we want to teach them how to advocate for themselves. And I'm telling you, you've got to hear this. This starts with teaching them to argue with you, teaching them how to disagree with you, teaching them the right way to disagree with you, teaching them to ask you questions. Like, why is a good question? I don't know why we have decided that why is somehow disrespectful. I'm so sick of parents saying to me, oh, well, my kid was so disrespectful. Really? What did they do? Well, they asked me why something was the way it was. That's a brilliant question. If we never asked why, we'd all still have an English accent and be sending money back to the crown. I worry that for too many parents, parenting is about power. They think they're doing it right if they're the ones in power, which then actually robs kids of the second thing that we're trying to teach them here, is their ability to roll with change. Because one of the best ways that your kids are going to learn to roll with change is by watching you roll with change. One of the best ways that your kids are going to learn to deal with the difficulty of change is by watching you deal with the difficulty of change. And then as we start to understand that, hey, life is always changing, now we start to teach them boundaries and we start to learn boundaries. Guess what? One of the best ways that they're going to learn that is by watching you. When your voice is the voice of boundaries, but you don't actually understand boundaries, then you're in trouble. So we need to understand and utilize boundaries ourselves. We need to respect our kids' boundaries. We need to navigate those well, because there is a little bit of tension there. I don't want you in my room. Okay, well, why not? Because it is my room, right? I mean, I pay for the house. But at the same time, I want to respect your boundary. I want to trust you. I want to respect that. And so if there's no reason, like I always say to parents, if there's not a reason, why are you going in there? Give them the space. Give them boundaries to be able to use. Now, those first 3 are really important. Teaching our kids to advocate for themselves by literally encouraging them to argue with us, by having them go to the teacher, by having them go to the coach. Teaching our kids that, you know what, when life changes, we have to adjust. We're going to roll with that change. We're going to keep moving. We're going to pivot, which I know is a new cool word. I'm not sure how I feel about it. And we're going to understand and utilize boundaries. We're going to tell people you can live however you want, but we only participate in certain things. When we've got those three down, number 4 is so important. Healthy kids and healthy adults, they take responsibility for their actions. Take responsibility for your own actions. If your kid has a habit of saying, okay, well, I did that, but you need to look inward first. Ask yourself, do I do that? Do I say, hey, you know what? I did that, but do I take responsibility for myself up to a point? Because if my kid is, there's a really good chance that that's what I'm doing too. I'm actually probably not being as forthright in taking responsibility for my actions as I would like to think that I am. And so one of the things that we want to do is we want to use our voice of influence in our kids. And I would suggest that our best voice of influence is our behaviors in teaching our kids to take responsibilities for their actions. And as we do that, as we take responsibility for our actions, we can also learn rule number 5, which is we rejoice with those who rejoice and we weep with those who weep. It's not really a rule, but it's a good aspiration. It's a good goal. It's a good thing for us to aim for, is the idea of rejoicing with those who rejoice. Be happy for other people when good things happen to them. If you teach your kids to be happy for other people when good things happen to them, they will become adults that are so far ahead of so many other people. Because be honest with yourself, if something really good happened to you, how many of your friends would you be afraid to tell because you'd be afraid of what would come after it? Because we don't do this well in society. Simultaneously, we also want to weep with those who weep. It is good to teach your children to grieve with other people. I am afraid as a society that we are kind of walking away from grief. We're just trying to cover it up with anger. Just burn everything down, break everything, scream, holler, point your fingers. What does it mean to weep with people who are weeping? We should use our voice to cultivate this in our children. Good parenting cultivates the idea, the habit of rejoicing with those who rejoice and weeping with those who weep. Being happy for our friends when they succeed. Being happy for other people when good things happen to them. It also cultivates the habit of grieving with those who are grieving, of sitting in other people's grief and not offering solutions, not offering trite words, just saying, hey, I'm here and I'm sitting in this with you. That is good humanness. That is the type of adult that I want to be and that I want my kids to be. The 6th thing that we want to cultivate with our kids is we want to cultivate resilience. And this is the one that I've talked about this a lot over the last few months. This is one of the harder ones. Because in order to cultivate resilience, it's like we do push-ups, not so we can do push-ups. We do push-ups because it makes us stronger by tearing down our muscles. And if we're going to build resilience, we build resilience by engaging in hard things. We build resilience by doing hard things, by engaging the thing that scares us and then moving forward. And that's scary. That's no fun. How do we do that well? Well, we have to do it ourselves. We have to engage the things that we think are hard. We have to engage the things that we know are hard. We have to engage the things that are scary for us. And our kids, by watching us, that is our best voice of influence. And then we have to encourage them to do hard things. We have to encourage them to do difficult things. When sports are done well, this is one of the best things that sports can teach our kids. Now, we can also really screw this up in sports because we can blame the coach, we can blame the referee, we can blame teammates, we can come up with all the excuses and all the reasons, right? And you'll if you think about this, principle number 4 of taking responsibility for your own actions and principle number 6 of cultivating resilience, they run together because you cannot cultivate resilience if you don't take responsibility for your own actions. If you have a built-in excuse, you will not build resilience in your life. But if you take responsibility for your own actions and you don't have a built-in excuse, you are primed to build resilience in your life. You are set up perfectly to build resilience in your life. Because here's the thing, life is hard for everybody. It's coming for everybody. I know people who can barely figure out how to pay their bills. They're struggling. The world has been unfair to them. I just read an article today about a guy who spent 6 years in jail because two girls got together and they completely made up a story about him. And he was in a poor family. He was a good athlete. He had a chance to go to the pros and make a lot of money. All of that went away because he spent 6 years in jail. That is unfair. Life is unfair. In fact, that's worse than unfair. That is unjust. And that young man will have to take responsibility for all of his actions from the day he gets out of jail to how he builds his life. And he can only do that if he cultivates resilience. And hopefully he has people around him who can sit there and they can grieve with him while he grieves the loss. But they will also be able to rejoice with him as he starts to do things that move his life forward. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. Our kids' lives will be hard. Things will come for them. A guy I went to college with, his son's wife just passed away unexpectedly with a brand new newborn at home. That is really hard. And it's probably a really hard spot to try to start building resilience there. I assume, because I know this guy, I'm assuming that he and his wife built resilience into their kids over the course of them growing up. But you have to have that foundation. Okay, so the 6 things that we want to talk about here with our kids, the 6 things that we want to use our voice for to cultivate in our kids, because healthy human beings do these 6 things. They advocate for themselves. They roll with change. They understand and they can utilize boundaries for a healthy life. They take responsibility for their own actions. They rejoice with those who rejoice. They celebrate other people's wins. Life is not a zero-sum game. You and I can both win. But they also weep with those who weep and grieve with those who grieve. And then number 6, they cultivate resilience. Use your voice to focus on these 6 things with your kids and watch them become human beings that blow you away. All right, what about you? Is there something you'd add to this list? Is there something you think is not necessary on this list? Let me know. Let me know in the comments. Send me an email. Find me and tell me. I don't care how you do it. Just let me know. Also, if you like this, feel free to share it with your friends. That really helps me, and hopefully it helps your friends. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share with a friend. And hey, give us that rating in your podcast store. Until next time, change possible.